Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, and Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meetings of the public body. This meeting of the planning board will be conducted both in person and by remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend the meeting can be found on the town's website. For this meeting, members of the public and committee members may attend the meeting in person, or for those who wish to do so remotely, may by following the instructions on the agenda. For those who are not in person, every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In addition, pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 20F, after notifying the chair of a public body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body or may transmit the meeting through any medium. At the beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any such recordings. Any member of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. The listings of the agenda items are those reasonably anticipated by the chair which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. Finally, per section 241(1) of the town code, except for procedural and housekeeping matters, town residents shall have the right to address a board on any item that requires a vote at a time before the board votes on that item. Such residents will be allowed as much time as a proponent of an item is permitted to have. So this meeting is being recorded, and we'll do attendance. So Pedro Pachano.
I'm here.
Jonathan Henkin.
I'm here.
Malcolm Fick.
Here.
Randy Nelson here. And Jeremy and Jackie are absent today. So we will get started with our Form As. We've got one today.
Let me guess, 26 Pearl Street?
26 Pearl Street. Yeah.
Pretty good guess, huh?
Okay, my name is Patrick McFold and I'm the land surveyor representing Pete Pelletier.
Wow, in color.
Mhm.
You don't get that very
The
often.
dragon. Thank you.
Okay, what he does is he owns what's outlined in green here,
Mm-hmm.
and what he's proposing to do is make two lots, one with a house on it and the other a vacant lot at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll make that house non-conforming.
That's to be removed.
Oh, really?
So I put the setback there, a little deep, 4.5 feet,
What's required?
and it's less than
Is
10.
it
Is that on here?
It's our one. I thought I just had it.
R1B,
Yeah.
which is 6,500?
So this here. The minimum side yard is 10 feet.
Oh, it is? Okay, all right.
So it's to be removed, or it
Yeah,
has been?
no, it
removed?
has to be removed.
Okay.
They're gonna take it off.
But you don't have to do that for the Form A.
No.
No.
But if you wanted to.
He'd
Expand it.
be in violation if he leaves it there. So when he applies for a building permit for a second.
Right,
one,
then he'd have to go to the ZBA and it'd be
Yeah,
a huge hassle.
Minimum.
I always said, what comes first, ripping down the building or getting the plan approved? I say get the plan approved.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, anybody have any questions?
No, I'll move to endorse. Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. motion carries. Did you bring
I did bring-
Sharpie and we'll sign your Mylar?
Chris, I said, I mean,
Chris, do you need one? And him goes there. Here? Oh,
I like your plans, Pat, it's really easy to read.
I like the color.
Very,
Thank you for pointing me for the roads here too, because I had a tough time with them. And the clerk actually had a layout.
Yeah.
It's not recorded either. So it came really good.
I like your river dragon.
There's others, right?
There are others.
That's what I heard. I don't know if it's right or not.
You gotta have fun with it.
It was science back up. Good.
Happy going to college for that, you do it so well.
Oh, I'm an engineer. Yeah, we do it too. I think I had a job. All right, excellent, thank you.
Good luck in getting home.
Yeah, no, it's always easier going back. I don't know why. It's after rush hour or whatever. It's crazy now. You're trying to sit down during rush hour.
It is, it's silly, isn't it?
Oh, it's the circles? The circles.
You okay?
Yes. I didn't realize that was Pedro's signature. I was gonna take it to him to sign. He was a pen and he was a model.
Do you have enough copies? I think. We got like four. You got one there.
Tim doesn't need it.
I think we're fine.
You're good?
Yep, we're all set. First two and then the. All right, excellent.
Thank you.
I always put out 5 because it seems to be the norm.
Yeah,
There are some towns still that are way up there.
we're trying to like reduce paper, so
I hear that.
thank you so much. Have a good night.
Too.
All right, everyone. Next item on the agenda are the minutes of October 12th. We have a motion to approve as amended.
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, excellent. Next item, item number 3, master plan review, review the latest update of the master plan, discuss progress, tasks completed. We're making this a standing item as we're kind of working through our communication. So I guess I just want to check to see if we've all reached out to the various boards. I'm trying to get on the select board for the November 6th meeting.
Oh, Steve is here.
Steve is here, yes, he knows that.
Yeah, but he can get just me.
I have,
Steve's got his hand up.
I've sent emails and calls and left messages and everything at the senior center and can't get anyone to return my call.
Don't mention it to me, so she must have gotten your call.
Hasn't
Never
responded.
bothered to call me back.
Okay.
I got a hold of Karen Smith on the rec committee. She did not have any, or the Parks and Recreation Commission, she did not have any clue that this should have been on our radar. I told her it's not a big deal.
Oh.
This is why we're starting this process. So she wanted to take her November meeting to discuss it with her commission, and then I'll go to their December meeting. So,
I saw that go out to the
you did.
agenda.
Awesome.
So
Thank you for
I think-
checking
I
that.
think you will be included.
I'm having trouble getting a hold of Vivian Orlowski.
She's here.
She is here? Oh,
Hi, Vivian.
oh, excellent. I don't know if she saw our inquiry through the town, so contact the chair. So we've got Council on Aging, Ag Commission. How are you doing?
So as I mentioned last meeting, I attended the tree committee meeting for this month, and they will be getting back to me with a response,
Yeah.
hopefully in November. I was unable to attend the Conservation Commission meeting last night, but Commissioner Evans, Agent Evans, Special Agent Evans assured me that I'll be on the agenda for the next meeting in
It's the
November.
Wednesday after Thanksgiving. They scheduled it.
Okay, he told me it was gonna be the 22nd, but
It's
that's
like
it.
the 20.
That would be 29.
Whatever. the 20.
Yeah, okay, good.
So 11:29.
And
Okay.
so, yeah, so I'm scheduled for that.
Okay. Okay. And you only had Council on Aging?
Mhm.
So I met with the Historic District Commission.
Yeah,
They only have 2 items on their list, but I threw in another 2 that were historical commission items that kind of spilled over.
yeah,
They, again, they, like everybody else, they didn't really know that they had specific responsibilities.
Sure.
At least the organization, the committee, memory didn't
Yeah.
include that. They're still working on all of their items.
okay,
But Don did bring up an item that is in the master plan, but isn't on an action item. And that was HCR 1.7, which is considered requiring a demolition delay, except in case of emergencies in the town bylaws.
Okay,
And that actually never made it onto an action item.
okay,
So that's, they're recommending that we add that as an action item.
okay, all right.
I remember we tried to make progress on that one.
Yeah.
Didn't really-
Yeah, it didn't go anywhere, but I mean, it's time to revisit it again. With a little, I mean, the last time there really wasn't any collaboration. That was when Jennifer let me know at the last minute that the demolition delay bylaw was going to be presented at the town meeting.
Mhm,
And there was no discussion by anybody about it.
mhm.
So, I think, it's, maybe time to take a look at it and see if there's some kind of way that we can, make it work. But
Okay,
it's on the list. Should be on the list.
what?
The Historical Commission is meeting, next Monday, not this coming Monday, but the Monday after. And there's actually 4 pages of, things for Historical Commission to do, so
Okay,
that'll be a long meeting.
okay. And your intent is to kind of
Plot
do a
through.
high level overview
Mhm.
and,
Yeah, I mean, what I said to the Historical Commission is that, what we had discussed, and, we wanted to update things, either say this should be done, this shouldn't be done, or there's some things that aren't on the list.
Mhm.
And,
Okay, great, that sounds good. So it sounds like we're probably on track for December to kind of have a regroup on where we stand with all the boards and commissions that had an actionable item out of the master plan. And then we can talk, I think, at that point about further outreach and, we're missing Jackie and she's been really
Mhm.
helping put this communication plan together. But that's kind of high level, that's what we had thought we would move from assessing where we are now with implementation of the master plan with all the other boards and committees to, okay, who are the new boards and committees that have formed since that time? And start having those conversations about what are the primary issues you're seeing? Do they kind of plug into existing items that another board or committee is already working on? And then I think the third tier of communications would be then like just general community conversations. And I think we don't know what that looks like yet.
yeah, at some point along the process, we should decide whether we're going to, modify the existing master plan or whether we need a new process.
Yeah.
Uh,
My personal opinion is this is an assessment of kind of like take stock of where we're at now. And once we have communication from all the existing boards and committees that were assigned, all the new boards and committees and community, I think that's when we can sort of say, hey, we go to select board jointly and sit down and say, maybe it makes sense to look at an update, right? And
do we
then,
need a tweak or do we need a?
right.
Yeah,
And
rewrite it.
Chris, can you give us a little insight into kind of what form an update might take and whether or not that's something we need to be looking at, maybe making a CPA application for at some point, or?
There's no prescribed format for a master plan update versus writing a new master plan. I think the key components would be updating any data, census data, demographic data, housing counts. Discussing changes in zoning and development patterns since the last plan. Substantial new developments that may have happened or are in the pipeline. Obviously updating any maps, open space maps. There's been a lot of land put in conservation. So on the flip side of things being developed, there's also things being conserved. So having an accurate picture of where we are in terms of data, in terms of maps, is important as a baseline. And so I think the data chapters have to be updated, the land use chapters have to be updated. And then, it can really take any form that you want. Maybe there's only certain chapters that you want to update, maybe the housing chapter, maybe the energy chapter is fine. So you can do whatever seems appropriate.
Do you know what the differences were between what was the 1970 document, 1990s document and the 2013 document? Was it a completely new document?
It was completely new. The change from the 70s document to the 90s document was totally different. And then from the 90s to the 2013 plan, totally different, brand new plans.
And on an award.
Yeah, I think, so much time had gone by, obviously, data and other things had to be updated pretty dramatically. I think the people involved was also a lot different. It was what I think was a more comprehensive committee put together for the plan that was ultimately published in 2013 than had been previous. So those were big differences. Yeah.
It seems like by the time we get around to, we'll have as much time of that 90s plan to the 2013 plan, about
Yeah.
15 years.
Yeah.
I think that's a standard kind of planning interval though, given kind of the pace of change that communities see. I've heard 20, but I've talked with some planners recently that are even saying like 10, 15 or more, and
Yeah.
maybe you have some insights into that as well.
It's 10 to 15
Mhm.
usually, and it depends how much community, how many community meetings, how long you want to devote to that.
Mhm.
If you're just looking at policies from a very technical level, if it's just this board looking at things, maybe updating things with other boards, and you're not going, you don't feel the need to go out and revisit the policy basis for the plan, then it can be a pretty quick job, and you could do that every 5 years, do it every 10 years, just updating technical data. But if it's time to revisit the plan, the vision, the overall goals of the plan, and do some community outreach to shape those again, that's a heavier lift, and it's typically done 10 to 15 years, maybe 20. It's more costly, it takes a lot more time.
And it took us 3 years
Yeah,
to do it.
yeah.
Hopefully we won't have to start from scratch this time, because this is a good document. It's been living for 10 years. We've been working on it for 10 years. There's stuff to come off, stuff to go on, but we're not really started from scratch. I hope.
When we started the process for the last plan, I think the planning board did a kind of a re-exam. We did a quick couple page memo of some of the basic differences. And the planning board at the time said, we think it's time to get together with the select board and do a full new plan,
Mhm.
see where we are, take stock and see where we are. So I think once that decision is made, and you can do it in steps, maybe step one is just update the data. And maybe apply for a CPA grant or other grant to help hire a consultant to do that.
Mhm.
And maybe that's year one. You get the data, maybe year two is apply for another grant and go out and do some outreach and community meetings and things like that. So you can take a phased approach over several years.
Mhm.
Makes the funding maybe a little bit easier
Mhm.
also.
Okay, that's good for thought. Yeah, I think timing wise, I was hopeful that we could have this initial round of engagement completed by the end of the first quarter of next year, and maybe produce as part of our report to the select board an update, like we normally do we've done this, we've done that, this many permits, but also we've taken a review of where we stand with implementation of our master plan, and here's a brief summary, so provide that as well, and then use that to then, starting in the summer, maybe, talk about what we want to do as far as revision. So I don't see this as a short process, I see this as a long process.
Yeah, good. Yeah. I think we're on the same page.
This current plan is still relevant, I think.
It has
Yeah.
a lot that's relevant, absolutely.
And you'll see a lot, if you look at the 70s to the 90s, 90s to the 2013 plan, you see a lot of carryover. And, there's kind of a through line for each plan.
Mhm.
They carry through. Yeah.
So I think the vision
They
from
were
the
never
70s
just thrown out.
Yeah.
They're always built on, I think.
Okay. All right, so we'll leave this as a standing topic, just,
Terrific.
hopefully we'll all continue to remember to do our outreach. And if anyone needs help, I think we're all here to support each other, so And I know Jackie is really eager to help us with the communication piece if we feel like we need help with the communication piece as well. All right, so I guess if there's no, Michelle, you didn't have any questions on that particular item? Okay. All right, so housing opportunities discussions. This is also another standing item we've got on our agenda. It's like the A and the B are evolving a little bit. But last meeting we discussed a couple of definitions that Jonathan had put together around congregate living, and we had a discussion about that. And Pedro has since provided us an outline zoning language for congregate living, and we also want to discuss a little bit more in detail a review of the definitions. So there were some documents that got circulated. I know, Jonathan, you sent something today, and I honestly have not had a chance to look at that today, just given my current
It was
schedule.
basically editing what Pedro sent out.
Oh, so you did red lines for that?
Mhm.
A lot of them.
Chris, do you happen to have those to share on the screen? And I think what we'll do, given that we're missing two of our board members, you know, I think we should definitely have the discussion. But if you guys are amenable to it, I'd like to hold it over to the next meeting as well, just so that we can make sure we've given Jeremy and Jackie a chance to.
Well, it'd be
Weigh
nice
in.
to see if we're on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can start that discussion.
Okay, the language that's on screen, Pedro Pachano sent this document around the other day to the planning board members. And Jonathan today sent around some changes which appear on the screen as red line, underline, or strike throughs. So the original text is Pedro's first suggestion, and then Jonathan sent around the red lines.
So Pedro, would you mind just telling us where some of this language was developed from? I know you had mentioned you sought out a couple of other communities zoning language for congregate housing, and if you want to just give the board and the public some background, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, well, I did a little bit of research online looking for regulations for this type of accommodation, and across the country, most of what I found was building code related. There was very little that I could find that was zoning related, but I did manage to get my hands on I think 6 documents, and the most relevant ones were one from Asheville. I don't know, it wasn't Asheville, Carolina, but it was near, I can't remember the name of the town. And then there was a really good one from Mount Shasta in California, both which are, you know, bigger communities than ours, but they had really good language. And so I looked through the 6 that I was able to find, and I just kind of picked out the ones that I think addressed some of the issues that I think would be important to some of the members of the board, and then some issues that I thought were interested in, that were included as part of the regs.
Okay.
I think it'd be helpful for everybody if Pedro or somebody from the board just refreshed our memory as to what the goal, before we get into the weeds. I wish we could do this all the time. Before we get into the weeds of language, what are we trying to achieve here?
All right, well, historically, I mean, going back really to the mid-19th century, Great Barrington was a community that had a large amount of what we can call boarders or lodgers, and those types of accommodations up and down Main Street, and really in South Main in particular that I know of was filled with these kinds of accommodations. And then historically across the country, during the 1940s and 50s, these types of accommodations were kind of wiped out through zoning. They're making a comeback across the nation, which is it's called congregate living in the building code, but it's commonly known as single room occupancies. And these are locations or places where people share a bathroom, kitchen, or both, and they each have their own bedroom. some will have a bathroom, some will have kitchen. But there's always some kind of shared accommodation among all of the residents of whatever facility it is. These things have a reputation for being large apartments or large houses that are super crowded and the whole thing, but they really can happen in small type settings, in single family homes. We even have language in our bylaw that kind of addresses that type of accommodation. And lately in town, we've seen our affordable housing and housing advocate groups and corporations looking into this type of accommodation to provide low income accommodations for people who require it. So some people might be familiar with Windrush, how that was converted into congregate living.
No.
Wait,
Not
Windflower.
Sorry, Windflower. And
Windrush is not congregate living.
and now
Be very
Thornwood,
clear about
Thornwood up at the other edge of town is currently, I believe,
In process.
in the process. And we don't have a vehicle or any kind of way for these two organizations to make these things legal. And so they, other than to go through a special permit process, and right now they're allowed or going to be allowed, I believe, at Thornwood, but at Windflower, they're allowed to function under a special permit that is really not about a permanent housing solution. So for me, it became important to try to provide an avenue for these types of accommodations to be legalized.
So it's two-pronged, which are kind of under the same umbrella of housing, but the first prong being another type of housing that could be explored in our community. And two, a response to what I was calling the B&B loophole, you know, in terms of there's this sort of complex operation that happens when you're living in a B&B space on a continuous month-to-month renewal basis, right?
Right.
And so we want to find a way to explore whether or not it makes sense to make these types of units legal in our zoning. Okay, all right. Does that frame it up for
That's a good
everybody?
Summary to me.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much for putting some language together.
Sure.
Did we all get a chance to read the language? Okay,
So the approach here that Pedro's presented, which we can go through, is, you know, it defines what congregate living is, generally small units, how they share facilities. It ties it back to a table of use regulations, which we'd have to talk about. Where would this be allowed by right or by special permit, or not allowed at all? So we haven't talked about that yet. Maybe that's another day. It talks about parking ratios, and site plan. So that's what this one or couple pages of text covers, as is typical for a section of the bylaw.
so we've got a general, we've got the purpose, and then there were some discussions as to the criteria to meet the definition of congregate living. Before we get into like wordsmithing, you know, I think this is an introduction. We can kind of take a look at hearing what your thoughts were in terms of wordsmithing. Were there any larger topical type issues that anyone flagged as like, that's a non-starter, or I think we need to expand in that area at all?
We may want to delay the table of use discussion for later, but I strongly believe that there should be by special permit only, because there's so much opportunity for abuse. Big picture, I think it's something we should do.
Just out of curiosity, did this type of housing come up in the joint housing subcommittee?
Well, it came up because I brought it up.
Okay, because we were talking
bringing it
about,
up.
but it hasn't like come forward as a formal recommendation yet?
No,
Okay,
no, and well, I mean, it came formal as a formal recommendation because we're doing it. So, I mean, there's no, it's on the list.
okay.
We don't have to wait for the housing subcommittee to say, here's something we should do.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we're trying to like move all these pieces in concert.
Yeah, I mean, and to piggyback a little bit on what Pedro was saying about, I was also looking for congregate living bylaws, and there are a few in Massachusetts. Specifically in Worcester, they have a congregate living bylaw, but it's restricted to seniors and people with disabilities, which has been in recent history, I think, the purpose for.
Almost almost all the samples that I've seen in Massachusetts are,
Yeah,
as you say, restricted.
So is that more like a group home?
The
site?
thing about Massachusetts is that the state actually provides funding for that type of accommodation, and it's called congregate facility. I mentioned this to you the other day, where we might not be able to call this congregate living. It might have to be called boarding houses or lodging or something else, because I think there might be a conflict
With what?
with that
the
term.
state definition.
Because the state has a definition for it, basically. I don't know if it's a definition, but I know that they have a program
Okay, yeah.
that they fund
Assume
that is for seniors and disabilities, people with disabilities, that type of housing. And it's called congregate. They don't call it congregate living, it's called congregate. I think they're just called congregate facilities, and the program's got a different name, but the word congregate is part of the program.
All right, we'll have to look at that.
Yeah, that's a good. Do you recall if the definition had some sort of like therapeutic or supplemental services that were wrapped into it where we could be clear that that's not what this
Yeah,
is?
it's
Okay.
like senior.
Well, but congregate living in Massachusetts has the senior housing and assisted living. And also the lodging and border houses, it all falls under. It all falls under it, and this was just an attempt to just narrow.
So, in the state law, to be eligible for congregate housing, you must be either elderly
Yeah,
or
that's what I'm talking
disabled.
about. So it's not, it doesn't include all that.
But that's for funding. That's got nothing to do with
It
zoning.
says to be eligible, well, maybe it is for fun.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's because it's a state program, right? I think we need some help from the planning office, but.
I don't think we have to get, I think
No,
it's
no,
an
we're not
important
getting
point, but I don't think we need to get hung up on it, right? We know what we're talking about in terms of occupancy.
Would like to take questions?
Or do we have hands raised? Sure. Eileen, go ahead.
Okay, I was wondering if you would consider under purpose using a word such as compact housing instead of smaller, because smaller, one thinks of a physically smaller facility.
Mm-hmm.
This might not be. That's all.
Okay,
Good, thank you.
no, good for that.
Well, I don't see smaller in here, I see reduced.
It's,
Size.
under.
Well, Jonathan redlined it, suggested smaller housing.
I would just take it out altogether and just say, development of housing defined as congregate living.
Yeah. In terms of the scope of what this style of housing would consist of, I'd be curious if anyone, it sounds Pedro's done the most definition, and he and I bumped into each other at town meeting, and so I was bending his ear on this, but there are some pretty specific definitions around like what a unit needs to consist of. And I had a concern about a unit only having a half bath in it and like having to share a full bath. Is that you address that?
Well, I tried to.
Okay, okay, so,
I had a lot of the same questions in my
Yeah.
head and
Yeah.
what I saw Pedro's original thought, and I think Jonathan's comments addressed a lot of
Yeah.
what I might have suggested.
okay,
So
okay.
I think it generally
Yeah.
And
limits the specificity that was in
Yeah.
the original.
Okay, in terms of if the zoning includes a lot of architecturally defined spaces, this board doesn't normally look at floor plans,
Right,
right? And so
well, some of us do.
I know you do.
But we're not.
But it's not in our purview. We're not like, you gotta make the bathroom a little bit bigger, right? So just in terms of potential for functionality, does this function at a building permit level for further compliance. I think that's what you had insinuated to me, was that it would need to function, there'd have to be a design level review at the time a building permit was pulled, right?
Well, what we were discussing though was, yeah, that's what we were discussing.
Like, how do you ensure then that there's compliance if we're, as a planning board, we're not looking necessarily at building interiors?
Right.
Unless there's some sort of narrative description that gets submitted that there'll be on floor one, X number of units that are a suite with a full bathroom and a suite with a half bathroom.
Well, I think you have to be careful because the two projects that we have in front of us are both existing B&Bs.
And so we don't want to make them non-conforming right out of the gate.
Yeah, and so, I think to be fair, it's much more likely we're gonna get converted B&Bs to affordable housing than we are new construction. And so I don't think we want to put a whole bunch of restraints in there that could take an existing building that works just fine and make it non-conforming.
That's why I think a special permit, the special permit is not to block these things, it's to allow them without having to specify all the details that would protect the town.
Okay, should we scroll through then in terms of, did you want to introduce your red lines or do
Can I
you?
just say one thing
Yeah.
to this point? I mean, the reason why I included all the specificity in here is because there was a lot of questions about this type of accommodation being right for use, and it's got this bad history in the whole thing.
What sort of abuse do you see?
And you know, there's always an effort on my part to try to make, whenever I put together something, try to make it as specific as possible so that there is no need for extraneous review. Because these, for example, these two entities that are undergoing these things, they really don't have the money to do
A special permit.
to go through that process and to
Right.
wait, and it's like, it's time and time, they're quick, they have to be quick for this other stuff. So that, you know, I just for.
So it is an unscrupulous slumlord who's gonna come in and buy a building, and if he's by right, can just follow the.
Right,
few-
but for that purpose, I put a lot of specificity here so that an unscrupulous landlord will look at this and say he can't be unscrupulous.
I don't think this is where the money is. You know, so I don't think.
I mean, when we look back at the history, it's not just a matter of zoning, got rid of congregate living. I mean, the increase in wealth in the middle class got rid of congregate
That's,
living.
I'll differ with you on that, it's not necessarily true. It was really zoning that did away with it. And it was a fear that, I mean, what happened in New York City in the 20s and 30s was a massive immigration that forced the slum conditions. So it was a fear that this was gonna happen across the country.
Well, I mean,
and to a certain degree, that's why zoning
I
swept
think
the
you're
nation.
both right, yeah.
I'm not claiming I'm 100% right, but I do believe that, we're seeing a resurgence of housing styles that were evidence of poverty before the 50s, when there was really a massive growth in the wealth of the middle class and working class. And now we're reverting it. We're getting back into, multifamily homes and congregate living and all things that were things of the economic past. And I'm not saying we don't need them, but I am saying that we have to safeguard against, the evils of the past as well. And if you look up just congregate living in a Google search, you're as likely to come up with as many hits that describe how cities and towns are trying to counter the evils of congregate living that they've allowed as much as legislation for allowing. When I was looking for bylaws, that's what I kept coming up with, was articles on, okay, here's the city in Tennessee that needs to back off from congregate living because someone's moved in and taken over.
That's interesting. I didn't come across a lot of that because it doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, just search for congregate living without bylaws, without,
Yeah.
laws or.
I have had a similar experience. What I found is a lot of how to house the homeless using SROs and how to, what does that mean in terms of zoning? So I did come across some similar things, and I don't think that's what anyone's intention here is, to create a bylaw that, is problematic. We're looking at this like we've got a challenge we need to solve, and we're trying to apply zoning to it. And I appreciate having a more thorough bylaw to start with. It's easier to like talk through the issues and make adjustments. And we may decide that that's the right way to go.
I think this is good in the specificity. It doesn't restrict a whole lot. I don't think. Jonathan made some edits that I think are excellent. And if we can include as much as possible, then that makes the special permit process that much easier. But I think the special permit process also has to include the economic nature of the applicant. Is the applicant going to represent something good for the town or not? I don't think Construct and CDC are going to have any problems with that. But I do think that, in a special permit process, we could put an applicant through some tough questions to make sure that they are not going to take undue advantage of this.
And you can write that in
Yeah.
as well. If there are special permit criteria, they can be part of the regulations. as
Yeah,
well.
I would,
Any special permit shall also find X, Y, Z,
right.
if that's important.
So we've got a definition of purpose, development standards. Did either of you want to comment on the development standards? Just in terms of, I see you flashed the half bath.
I'm just trying to keep it as generic as possible
Mhm.
and
I thought Jonathan's edits were good in that way. I didn't know if any of you had come across what typical sizes of these types of units were. I mean, is this the range, 150 to 400? I don't particularly know, and I don't know if we.
yeah,
talked to
I didn't know
any
that either, but it
providers.
sounded reasonable, and
Or-
Pedro put that in
You know,
there.
Yeah, so it's
units
Pedro's
or
fault.
Number of units in a development, or the ratio of parking to units, or the ratio of staff to units. I don't know any of these.
Yeah.
these types of things.
Yeah, the sizes were in some of the models that I saw, and they're basic sizes for hotel rooms.
And
The parking just, I actually, spoke with Jane. And I'm not the only person who confuses Jane and June. I spoke with Jane about parking a little bit.
That construct.
Yeah, construct, and she mentioned that, it's been mentioned before too, that a lot of people that, for example, are in Flower, they don't own cars. So it's thinking up of a reduced sort of parking requirement.
You can always provide more, but
You
you
can
have to
always provide
provide.
more, but you have to provide the minimum,
But if you don't have enough, then the town gets screwed.
I think it depends on location, right? So,
So I object to number 8, because the planning department is not gonna be able to review rental.
You notice I didn't put that in there, that was.
Yeah, I'll have to work on that one. I like the idea, but my office is not gonna be able to do that.
But I think that's where a special permit process can also vet these things.
Just.
Do we
I
know?
just want to go on the record.
Oh, sure.
I don't agree with that. I don't think it should be a special permit, because I think we want to make this as easy as possible
Mhm.
and as inexpensive as possible.
Do we know from any research? I haven't seen like the level of staff. I don't have any input there. I am familiar with different populations that are being served, and they're being supportive services like in the building, but do any of you have any insights as to like what an appropriate staff level is, or is there a chance that this isn't staffed at all? There's just a building super?
I put some requirements in here for a super, and then the requirements are for management plan for. The Mount Shasta law required it for projects with more than 7 units. I think I put 9, just to be kind of commensurate with our bylaw. But that's it. Again, I can ask Jane what because they're planning on doing a couple of smaller, lodging houses type things. I can ask her if but they manage them, so that's maybe
Right,
that's
so
not a
central
good example, because
Okay,
it's a good, I think that's the big point, right? Because you have basically it's multifamily living, and somebody's got to take care of the garbage, and somebody has to have that kind of plan, so it has to be put on.
Someone has to maintain the communal facilities.
Right, so it has to be put on whoever is running it, It's a multifamily, either consider it a hotel, you consider a multifamily, it runs the same way.
You wash the dishes when you leave, or you're gonna get out of your apartment.
Yeah, that's stuff I'm not worried about. I think people will come together on that, but it's the other stuff, it's garbage, it's snow removal, it's.
there would need to be.
Maintenance, like the maintenance common areas, like that stuff I do.
Yeah.
Worry about. And the common space again is just something that it was in. And I know the Mount Shasta law is really good, and it was in that, and it was in a couple of others, and I was wondering if it would be, I don't know, again, I was just trying to.
Yeah.
To put stuff in here that would make it less. Controversial for the members of this board who think that this type of living is controversial, so providing common space makes it a little bit kind of like nicer for people and the whole thing. I'm not sure if it's a viable thing, really, because, you have a common area of whatever it is, 200 square feet, that could be 2 apartments, you know what I mean?
I think that once we feel like we have a framework, it would make sense to reach out to Construct and CDC and say, we're considering this, and, we recognize you either are operating or are considering operating a facility that might fall under, this is part of the reason we're taking this up, and seek some input, as part of our.
Or does your facility
process.
comply?
Yeah, yeah. So we've got parking, we've got common spaces, laundry, that's nice, I don't know if that should be required,
I think, if there's one thing that should be, I think, definitely.
Yeah, I would only say like. I guess I would wanna see if it's an existing building, how much laundry is already there. Just because laundry, if you're not tied to sewer, it can be a really big load on a septic system.
That's true.
Storage space, I think that's a great idea, people are always gonna have bicycles and.
But didn't you put it for, that you have to, what did you put in here, John, for storage, that it has to be for every resident?
No, he just said shall be provided for all CL units.
Number 6 up on the screen right now. First one.
For all units,
So they have to be,
so one for every, that's a lot.
well,
It doesn't-
I read that to mean it has to be
It
available
doesn't
to
say,
everybody,
it doesn't say that, it just says the storage space.
but it has to be available to everybody.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be individual storage.
I mean,
No,
spaces.
no,
I
but
guess I'm used to, the New York City apartment living,
Yeah.
where if this is in the contract, you have your own.
We
Right,
have a locker basically.
4, but
Yeah.
you get
But
like
that may not-
4x4 by 8 foot.
that may not be so easy with converting a B and B.
Right, no, this is why I'm bringing it up, because, for all units. I don't know, to me, it reads that every unit gets its own space. If it's like one space that people can share, that's that's different.
Well, you had it as a separate usable storage space, and
We can work.
we can
with
clarify
the
that. I
intent
mean,
later on,
yeah. I think the intent is, having storage area,
Makes
it's
sense.
available to everybody, whether they divide it into, chop it up into individual, little cells, that's,
And I think we want the applicant to solve all of these problems.
Do you mind continuing to scroll down, please?
That's it.
That's it, okay. And then deviations may be granted by special permit from the plan.
There was another set in the development part two. I didn't see that you corrected that. Did you put that in the development part two, John?
Where was that?
Number 10 in the development part?
I didn't see
Yeah,
it.
you didn't specify by the planning board there.
So, well, I think you would probably, that would be a blanket statement for the entire section.
Yeah.
But we would have to state that we are, that the planning board is a special permit granting authority.
Well, that's when we get
Somewhere.
the table of use.
That's what they were
Yeah.
using.
You didn't say what it was, so I put in the planning board.
Yeah, no, I think that's
Because the
good.
planning board actually looks at plans.
So the zones where these two existing facilities are, one's an R4, right? Windflower's R4,
Probably.
and Thornwood is is it a B? Is it a B?
B2A.
Okay.
Is it
It's a
B2A?
special-
Yeah, I think it's the B2A, yeah.
It's in the Thornwood zone.
It's a special zone.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why it shouldn't be permitted in all zones.
By special permit.
Well, because, and I mean, I see that too, because it could be, but we're already allowed borders in all residential.
Yeah.
districts. So, I mean, it maybe somewhere in here, it has to be specified that there's, a limit to how many borders you can have in the smaller residential. zones
But
or
you're still
whatever,
you're still subject to lot coverage and setbacks and all of that.
Right, so you can't fit them in there.
Yeah.
right?
I mean, the reality is it's probably gonna happen in more rural zones.
But the question too is whether or not, the more rural zones or the residential zones that are not hooked up to infrastructure, will this be that much more of an intensive use? That'll be problematic infrastructurally.
I mean, I think that we might want to look at the smart growth overlay principles in terms of where this kind of housing could be provided so that things like transportation infrastructure is available, just so that we're not handicapping people from being able to take advantage of an affordable type of housing, but can't get to work because, they're 5 miles by bicycle in December or January,
Yeah,
and
but-
they're not on a bus
Yeah, but
line.
are they better off having housing or not?
Well, that's a valid point, but, you can't keep your housing if you can't keep your job, so, one of the principles of the smart growth was
And we-
a connectivity to
And we now have
infrastructure.
this, what's it called, the micro transit?
Yeah, which serves a lot of
I
people
believe
who are
they're
outside
already,
the normal,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the normal bus routes.
Maybe more of that.
I think we probably have to do it all, because Windflower, we're not moving that,
No,
right? Like,
no,
that's set.
No, we're not.
That would be my thinking, would be to try to get it on infrastructure. And maybe
You can talk about the appropriate locations, appropriate zones,
Mhm.
by right or by special permit. How many there should be. Maybe you only want 2 in the town. Maybe you want them, like PERDs are separated by a certain distance.
No,
You know,
I don't
these
think
are
that's
all
gonna-
things you can think about.
yeah, I don't think that's gonna solve the housing crisis.
okay.
It's in the Windflower, looks like it's in the R2.
R2.
Oh, it is that.
I mean, and these are, the 2 projects we're talking about are conversion to permanent housing from transient
Mhm.
housing and, which is gonna be more objectionable to the neighborhood, the transient or the permanent. I think there's no question there.
Good point.
All right, anything else we want to go over tonight? Sort of introduce this, we've got some red lines.
What are we gonna do with it?
Well, I think we want to get Jackie and Jeremy's input and we can work on wordsmithing it. So
And
we'll
hopefully
review the
everyone-
red line.
Hopefully everyone will read it.
Well, do
You
you
can't send it to
wanna,
me at 3 on the day of the meeting.
I sent it to you, but I've just written
Uh.
it.
do you wanna put a version out there to the nonprofits or to anybody else for input? Do you wanna accept Jonathan's changes or just leave it as is
I've sent it to Jen.
and say
You've already
that,
shared it? Okay.
you know,
And it's
and
public document.
Which did you share?
Mine.
Yours.
invite
Her
people
own.
to come and discuss at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think
or-
that's a great idea. Let's share and invite.
Well, if we're gonna do that, we should share the,
Yeah, I think this should be our current working document.
The red line one?
The red line.
Mhm.
I mean, we can modify
both.
that. I mean, we're not
Showing-
accepting it, but
Showing the
yeah.
red lines?
Yeah.
Showing the red
Uh-huh.
lines,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Okay,
think that's
sure.
fine.
Sure.
This is the direction where we are talking about taking it.
It's a work in process.
Yeah, it shows the process.
Okay,
So
great.
Jane's only, concern was about the management plan, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
She
that's
like, she
good
was
info.
fine with the rest of it.
well, that could be informative for us.
Yeah, I mean. I mean, if they have a management plan, then we don't have to include a requirement for an on-site super if everything's covered.
They have a manager, it's called June.
Who's
So,
retiring?
June's
Shall
retiring.
I send this out or?
I can send it to Construct, I can send it to CEC as well.
Okay,
I
great,
can do it, yeah.
great.
Thank you. Brenda.
It'll show up on our website, right, as a document from tonight or?
We can put it, we can append it to the minutes.
Yeah.
We can put it on the website as
Isn't
a
it supposed to?
standalone,
Yeah.
you know, if you want something on your page that says concept draft
We-
for congregate living,
I
we
was
can
gonna
do
say,
that.
you should add a header that says draft document as of and the date and,
Okay,
yeah, just
I
so
mean,
that it's clear that it's a working document.
But I'd be okay if it was just in the minutes. But if we present a document at this meeting and work on it, don't we have to include it as a public document?
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I think my comment was about if we're gonna send it
we can send out
external,
that we
just to
think,
put, in a header or a footer that it's a draft and
yeah,
kind of a work in progress. It's not
For discussion.
for discussion,
Right.
exactly.
Yep. Okay, I'll put that on. I'll make sure Jen has a copy for the minutes.
Okay,
And
that'd
then
be
you
great.
can send it to Jane and
Carol?
Carol. And, then we can send it out to whomever else wants to talk about it.
Great, thank you. All right. Excellent. Let's see, so we talked about congregate living, we didn't really talk about housing type.
The
yes,
definitions too are at the end of
Definitions,
the document.
they were at the end of the document, yeah.
They're there.
The only thing I was looking for clarification on was I think some of those are already in our.
Yeah, boarding house
Right.
and lodging house. There.
Okay.
They're not, no.
Oh, no, I'm
What?
sorry, they're not.
They were.
They're-
That's why I included it.
Okay, is it because we've got a section on it?
They're
keep
listed
getting
in,
confused.
yes, we have a section for borders.
Yeah,
Maybe we wanna think about changing that into boarding house, and we've also got in the use table, lodging shows up, but it's nowhere else in the
Right.
bylaw.
It doesn't hurt to add them to the definitions.
Yeah, I think it was helpful. for sure.
so we did read through those previously.
Yeah.
And yes, I agree. We want to just add them to our section 11, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We will add those 3 definitions, and there's a question as to whether or not we want to change the section on boarding houses.
Just the name, because it says borders, and it's under accessory use.
So do we need to check for conflict with the definition then?
I just think, it's weird that it appears there, it's like a zoning, a residential, use, but it only appears in the accessory use, it doesn't appear in the residential section of the bylaw, it appears in the accessory use section, you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, so any
Accessory
accessory
uses.
use would apply, yeah.
That's because we're a single family culture. And you want to bring in non-related people as an accessory use.
I don't- I totally understand why it's here.
Yeah.
I would like to maybe see it.
I'm not arguing to keep it, though.
Yeah, I totally see why it's here. It makes perfect sense. But maybe if we include boarding house as a definition, then we change this to boarding house, and maybe we can add a section in the residential part that says for boarding house, or maybe in the definitions for boarding house, look at the accessory uses, not the, because again, I go through these documents, and I'm sure you do too, and it's terrible when you can't find something, when it's not where you logically think it's going to be. It's a difficult enough document to read.
And boarding house is an owner occupied house, right?
Yeah, well, it would be, renting rooms or the furnishing of table board.
That's where my parents met.
At a boarding house, and the rest was it.
And then the boarding house, is defined as a single unit dwelling.
A single,
Single.
it should be a
unit dwelling.
single.
With 3 or fewer guest rooms for long-term tenants where meals are provided with no separate kitchen facilities.
Okay,
I'm telling, I've been looking at this stuff for like 4 years now, and
and it's still head scratching.
because it all makes sense, but I don't know where in here it should go and how it should be laid out in the book,
And if it's even relevant, maybe we put a call out to the community if anybody's boarding and can help us understand exactly how it's functioning in a modern.
Historically, I think we want to keep it because it was, we were a boarding community. There are 3 buildings on Main Street I know that were built specifically to do that. Mike Parsons' building is a boarding house.
Okay,
Really?
all right.
And all of Railroad Street. Oh, I'm sorry, those are whorehouses, not boarding houses.
Yeah, that's an entirely different. We're not adding a. All right. So is there anything further we want to review on alternate housing type definitions? Other than it looks like we need to, when we visit the discussion on, or excuse me, the table of uses to discuss the congregate living, we also want to look at lodging houses and boarding houses.
For the table of uses,
Yeah,
because in the table of uses, we have just lodging, right? That's what shows up as lodging.
right. We're trying to make it consistent across the document.
Right, this is the thing. So it says lodging house or tourist home for transient guests. There's no boarding house in here.
Which is why I'm saying we should talk about adding it,
Yeah.
right?
If you'd like, I can, provide us this,
Well, it would be a residential use.
Well, boarding house is long-term, and lodging house is not.
right, exactly. But I can go through here and add congregate living, and I can give some thought and maybe make a proposal as to how borders and lodging I don't know, should appear in here. I don't know if you guys want, I can do it. If not, we can just leave it out.
I mean, in our mind, in your mind, is there a difference between like congregate living and the border?
Yeah, the border is limited to a
They're
few
getting
people.
room and board, right? So like,
Yes.
if
Three
you're
or
my
So you have to be
boarder,
provided a meal.
you get food also,
Okay.
right? But if you're in congregate living, you have flexibility to
Okay.
carry your own.
And borders are 3 or fewer. For a congregate
That's in
living,
an owner occupied home,
Yeah,
usually.
in a single unit dwelling,
Which means it has to have a kitchen and a bathroom,
And,
because it's dwelling, yeah.
because of our definition of unit, yeah.
and Windflowers, how many people do they have there now? Any idea? There were like 13 rooms plus 2 houses or something.
I can find, I think they were having trouble figuring out what to do with the houses, but I can find out what's there if you're interested.
Well, one is gonna be an emergency.
There, yeah.
There, what'd you say, Chris?
One of the houses there at Windflower is gonna be that emergency family shelter.
Ah.
Not shelter, emergency family house.
Uh-huh. Okay.
okay, all right, so next time we'll talk about table uses and
Do you want me to go through and add it and then put it in for discussion?
go through anything. I mean, it fits under residential, right?
If you do, Pedro, you and I talk, because last time this board discussed getting into that, definitions, town council had some comments about that because there are existing state laws. I
Mm,
can't remember where, but let's talk about it before.
Sure. What I was suggesting is just to have something that we can discuss.
sure, a red line version, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
We'll-
that'd be
we'll bring
great.
something back. But I think we'll maybe ask.
Okay.
So at least won't be cross. Yeah, conflicted with other ones.
No sense in getting the attorneys up in a bunch too early. All right, thank you.
Maybe you can ask them about the congregate.
Yeah,
Before we do anything else.
we have an arrangement with them where we can shoot them an email like that and just say, can you?
Shoot as many emails as I want. Which one's the most?
They're routine, man.
I know, but are they responsive? That's the question.
Where do they call up Chris and say, are we gonna get paid for this?
Hoping that's like it only takes me a couple of minutes to double check.
I hope they're routine.
Okay, so we'll keep these items on for next meeting, Chris.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Also to have Jackie and Jeremy be able to weigh in, and to see if we get any further information from council and.
So I'm gonna invite them to come to the next meeting.
Sure, they have the time to do
Carol,
that. Yeah, if they wanna just send in comments, that's fine
Okay.
too, yeah. Or if they wanna join on Zoom, if that's easier for them,
There's,
absolutely.
so there's CDC and there's Construct. What about Berkshire Housing? Might they be involved?
Did they develop?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, maybe we should put them on the list too.
I can send it out to Eileen.
Great.
I'm in contact with her as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, good. Excellent. All right, town planner report, anything, Mr. Rumble?
Just a few things. So your next meeting is November 9th. There'll be a joint meeting of the select board and board of health here that night. So for the planning board, we should find a different location, which could potentially be the fire station if you want to meet in person. Or we could meet entirely by Zoom. Do you have a preference?
In person.
Are you available on the ninth?
Yes.
Okay.
What, can you say again? I'm sorry.
There's another meeting that will be
There's a
here,
room,
Okay.
that night. So we'll need another venue or just by Zoom.
if the fire station is available, that would be great.
We're filling at the library, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't know, so this might be the case, that all our Zoom accounts might be obligated that night, so it might be just an in-person meeting.
We'll notice it, will we notice it as such?
Yeah, it'll be noticed
Okay.
appropriately.
Okay,
And that's legal now, right? It's going back
A
to
lot
just
of
in
towns are
person.
doing no Zoom anymore.
Yeah, so
for the
I'll
record, I'd like that. we
preferences
also
for
do-
in-person. we'll-
Yeah, no, I like it too.
Okay, what else?
Speaking of CPA applications, Brandy brought it up earlier regarding the master plan. CPA applications are out now, and I think step ones are due next week. So that's my report for Jeremy. The town is under contract now with a state grant for over $1 million for a housing rehabilitation program. So that's something that's been really in high demand over the years, where low and moderate income homeowners can get pretty substantial grants.
Is that like the one we had that we shared with Sheffield or something?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so it's typically the grants go for emergency issues, a failing roof, a new boiler, things like that, de-leading, energy efficiency with windows, structural issues, ramps for people who need handicap access and things like that.
Cheaper than building from scratch.
And it keeps people who are of limited means in their homes and keeps those homes healthy and safe. So really important. So we'll have that program up and running in a couple of months. We have an RFP out now for housing rehab specialists who will run that program for us. So
Why aren't we using the RPC then?
they did not respond to this particular RFP.
In terms of that program, generally speaking, how's the community response to it?
There's always more need than we have money.
So people learn about it and then they pursue the dollars?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, Yeah,
people were able to access it.
people are very knowledgeable about it, really, really seeking that.
And is this a shared grant or is this strictly?
It's strictly for the town of Great
Great.
Barrington. So, yeah, the need was so great from previous shared grants that
And,
we were able to secure the whole thing.
and price wise, how does that compare with what we got previously?
It's more than we've ever had before.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Great.
Didn't we share like 900K with Sheffield?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
So,
That's great.
yeah, it really shows the amount of demand out there and the cost of repairs. I mean, this will pay for, I think, maybe 25 grants.
Well, it's not just the cost of repairs, it's because it's the cost of new construction too.
So that's really good
Great,
news.
thank you.
And further, work on all of our housing issues and more progress on our housing strategy. Lake Mansfield Road project, I don't know if I'm stealing your
No,
thunder,
go for it.
Randy. The construction on Lake Mansfield Road will begin next week with installation of erosion controls and signage and things like that. Most likely the week of November 6th. Heavy construction will begin probably at the north end, clearing for the parking lot, which this board saw, as you'll recall, for site plan review. And at that time, week of November 6th, car traffic and most likely recreational pedestrian traffic through the Lake Mansfield space will be restricted,
Restricted or prohibited?
probably prohibited. Yeah.
Greatly restricted.
Yeah, so time to change your.
You have to-
you use
My
that
morning,
road to-
my morning walk is.
You have to learn to walk on water.
Yeah.
Once the
Yeah.
lake
Or
freezes,
drive-
that's
drive
what
the
people
other way
do.
around. I suppose you could launch a boat launch. Paddle to the north end, around, skirting the construction, if you were ambitious. So I did want to let you know about that. That'll be, a disruption and a change for a lot of people.
For months, right?
Well, the traffic will be,
Forever.
yeah, the portion of the road between the boat launch and the beach will be essentially beginning in November.
But what about the house there?
That will always have access, at least from the north, probably either way during construction, we'll have to work with them,
Uh-huh.
but that will always have access from the
And,
north. going.
and the social club or whatever that is there.
Yeah, we're
that's,
close.
Yeah, that'll have access.
Yeah.
And then finally, I did want to let you know another project that you've seen, the Houstonic School redevelopment. The select board have that on their agenda for Monday night to sign the purchase and sale agreement and development agreement for that developer to commence their work on that.
Great,
So
smells like
good
progress.
news in the housing and open space arena tonight.
Never say never.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. No applications coming our way?
I know, I think there will be some, like, I'm not sure if they'll be ready by the night.
Okay,
I know of some percolating.
great, thank you. Board subcommittee updates, issues and concerns, Malcolm?
We had a housing subcommittee meeting, a joint meeting with the Affordable Housing Trust on Tuesday. We're having another meeting, a follow-up meeting with them on I think the first week in December. It was a productive meeting, but nothing, just discussing issues and not really discussing anything specific
No
actions.
action
But
plans, okay.
I think there's a desire on both parts to, have synergistic discussions as far as that goes.
Okay, thank you for attending. Jonathan, anything for you? Nothing for you? Okay, I have nothing either. So we'll move to citizen speak. Michelle, anything? Okay. Eileen, James, Steve, or Vivian, any public comment? Just raise your hand and Chris can unmute you.
I will say one more thing.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I really should have mentioned this this week. There's also a regional issues committee, the RPC Regional Issues Committee meeting that was extremely interesting because of the it was mainly about solar and new regulations that are coming down the pike and ways of trying to move solar away from green fields to, brownfields and rooftops and off of, ground mounted on green fields. Mainly because the weight of solar to meet the state's goals is, if we keep developing on green fields, it's gonna keep developing out here. Because the people that use the power don't have any green fields. And so, we're trying to influence things that way. But it turns out the biggest, and Jonathan, you encountered this a little bit, I think, in yours, the biggest impediment to large scale solar is the electric infrastructure
Grid.
and the amount of three phase that's around, and there's not a lot of action on that. There's nothing going on that's providing leverage to either National Grid or other source to open things up. So don't know where that's gonna go, but anyway, that was an interesting discussion.
That reminds me, I think I mentioned it to this board, but we don't have a provision that I could see in our table of uses for energy storage, which is a kind of like the next evolution for solar is, storing it close to where it's produced. And that may be something, I've seen that as an emerging issue for land use planning, Chris. Some people have tried to say it's a utility, but if you look at the definition of a utility, it's a little different because usually it's these solar energy companies are operating these energy storage facilities, which essentially look like
Big generators?
no, they look like storage units.
Oh,
They're
really?
like Connex boxes,
Oh.
A lot of different forms.
Yeah,
of them. Sometimes
so
sometimes
maybe
they're big batteries, sometimes it's hot sand. There's a lot of different ways to
we
do
have any
it.
hot stand.
Oh, sure.
They dig it, they build it, they charge it.
So Chris, I got something from the town about the town just signed a deal with a new electrical provider or something.
I think there's some info on the webpage about the town's municipal program,
And
right on the homepage.
is there? I still have National Grid. Is there any downside to that, or would it be advantageous to the town?
You may be automatically enrolled with.
So National Grid is the distributor. The town negotiates a supplier at a specific rate, and I think the town usually negotiates that it's all renewable. And you are in that program unless you have opted out of it.
Oh, so I'm in there by,
Yeah. Look at your bill,
Yeah.
and look at the,
I can't understand. Well, first of all, I don't,
we'll bring it in and we'll.
my bill is zero, so it doesn't
We'll
matter.
help you, we'll help you
Well,
understand.
what do you don't have any supply chain.
Well, I'm just wondering if it's something I should be worried about or think about.
Well,
it would-
it actually turns out that we just changed plans. The town just changed plans. Plan that we had was actually substantially more expensive than the
The new
basic
one?
plan from National Grid.
Yeah, the prices changed
Yeah,
right after the.
and so now it's back in line again, but it is a savings with this it's basically an aggregator. It's
Okay.
All right, so we don't have any citizen comments, so we can adjourn at 7:18.
Wow.
Sorry, Kim.